A cold breeze whispered through the empty streets as Mia hurried home, her footsteps echoing against the silent night. She glanced over her shoulder, feeling the prickling sensation of being watched, but nothing stirred in the shadows. She picked up her pace, her breath visible in the chilly air, and her heart began to beat faster. She thought of the email she'd received earlier, a message from someone unknown who called themselves the Seer. The subject line had read, "Don't go home tonight." She'd dismissed it as a prank. But now, the silence of the streets, the faint, eerie sound of distant footsteps, she was beginning to wonder if there was more to it. Mia rounded a corner and finally saw the familiar sight of her apartment building. The warm glow from the windows was a comfort, urging her forward, as if she could leave the unsettling feeling outside. She reached for her keys, only to realize that they weren't in her bag. Frustrated, she checked her pockets, and her heart dropped, they were gone. Just then, her phone buzzed. Another message from the Seer. "I warned you." Mia's stomach twisted. She wanted to believe it was just some sick joke, but as she stood there, her gaze fixed on the text, she heard a sound, a slow, creaking noise from above. She looked up to see a shadow moving on her fire escape, inching closer with each passing second. "Who's there?" she called, her voice shaky. There was no answer. Mia's pulse raced as she took a step back, her gaze fixed on the shadow above. Whoever it was moved closer to the edge of the fire escape, barely visible against the dark night. She swallowed, fighting the urge to scream. Her phone buzzed again. "Turn around," the message read. Every instinct told her to run, but some strange, morbid curiosity rooted her in place. Slowly, she turned, and her heart nearly stopped. A figure stood at the end of the alley, just out of reach of the streetlights. Their face was obscured by the hood of a dark jacket, and though they didn't move, Mia felt a cold, calculating gaze on her, as if they were waiting for her next move. Her phone vibrated once more. "They can't help you now." Panic surged through her, snapping her out of her trance. She bolted toward her building's entrance, slamming her fists against the door. "Help! Please, someone!" she cried, hoping someone, anyone, would hear her. But as she turned back, the figure was gone. She searched frantically, scanning every shadow, every corner. Her phone buzzed again. Hands shaking, she looked down. "You didn't listen." The message was signed, once more, with a simple name. The Seer. Mia's heart raced as she tried to piece together the messages and the figure who had just vanished into the shadows. She gripped her phone tightly, her eyes darting around the alley, half expecting the Seer to reappear at any moment. With trembling hands, she fumbled to dial 911, but just as she hit call, the line went dead. A message flashed across her screen, "No service." "What is going on?" she whispered, feeling the weight of dread settle over her. The Seer had somehow planned every move, every escape route, even her attempt to call for help. She was trapped. Mia looked around, desperate for a way out. A ladder leading to the roof caught her eye, and with no other choice, she climbed, hoping to put as much distance as possible between her and the mysterious figure. As she reached the top, her phone buzzed again. She took a deep breath, steeling herself before looking at the screen. "I know where you are." Panic surged. How could they track her so precisely? Mia glanced around, scanning the skyline. Was the Seer watching from another rooftop? Could there be cameras hidden somewhere? The thought chilled her. Then, a memory flashed. Just a few days ago, a strange app had appeared on her phone without explanation. It was labeled "For Your Eyes Only," and she'd brushed it off as some glitch or spam. Now, dread filled her as she wondered if it had been installed by the Seer, tracking her every move. The Seer's next message confirmed her fears. "That app on your phone, did you think I wouldn't know?" Mia's mind raced. She'd always thought she was careful online, always cautious about her privacy. But now she realized that someone had breached her defenses, slipping into her life without her even noticing. "I don't know what you want." She typed back, her fingers trembling. "Leave me alone." The response was almost immediate. "Oh, Mia. You can't escape the truth. I only want to show you everything you've hidden from." Before she could respond, the screen flickered, and a grainy video began to play. It showed her own bedroom, shot from a hidden angle. Mia's stomach twisted as she recognized the footage. It was from the night she'd received the first message. She watched herself in the video, glancing at her phone, her face a mixture of curiosity and fear. The video ended with a close-up of her own face, staring into the camera as if she were looking directly at the Seer. Mia felt her knees go weak. How are you doing this? She typed, fighting back tears. Who are you? This time, the seer's response was different. I'm the one who knows you better than you know yourself. And soon, you'll see why. And with that, her phone shut off, plunging her into the silent, inky darkness of the rooftop. Mia's hands shook as she held her now useless phone. Alone in the dark, she listened to the silence, broken only by the distant hum of the city below. She had to find help, someone who could explain how the seer had infiltrated her life so completely. For now, though, she was on her own. She looked around, spotting a faint stairwell light leading back down. She took a deep breath and began her descent, her footsteps echoing off the narrow walls. Every step felt like it might be her last safe moment before the seer's next move. As Mia reached the bottom of the stairwell and stepped onto the street, a new message vibrated through her phone, lighting up the screen with a single word. Run. Her blood turned cold. She glanced around, but there was no one in sight. Who, or what, was she running from? Was the seer nearby, watching her even now? Just then, she heard hurried footsteps around the corner. Without thinking, Mia took off, sprinting down the sidewalk, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She wove through alleys and side streets, hoping to lose whoever, or whatever, was following her. Her phone buzzed again as she ducked behind a parked car, gasping for breath. This time, it was a photo, one that made her heart sink. The picture showed her parents' house, taken from the front lawn. A message followed. You're not the only one I'm watching. No, 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 she muttered, clutching the phone. Panic flared as she imagined the seer's reach extending to her family. Just then, footsteps grew louder, closer. Mia peered around the edge of the car and saw a figure in a dark hooded jacket approaching, their face obscured by shadows. She shrank back, pressing herself against the cold metal, trying to steady her breathing. The figure stopped mere feet away, standing still as if listening. Mia held her breath, daring not to make a sound. After what felt like an eternity, the figure turned and walked away. As soon as it was safe, Mia bolted out from her hiding spot and ran back to her apartment. She locked the door, pulled down the blinds, and double-checked every lock. She leaned against the door, sliding down to the floor, trying to calm the storm of fear raging within her. Then, her phone buzzed one last time for the night. She stared at the message, a cryptic line of text that made her heart race anew. Tomorrow, Mia. Tomorrow, you'll see. It was then that she realized the truth. The seer wasn't just playing games with her. This was something far more sinister, and it had only just begun. The next morning, Mia sat by her apartment window, staring blankly at the sunrise. She hadn't slept, her mind raced all night, trying to piece together who the seer was and why they had targeted her. Her inbox was still full of cryptic messages and threats, but something felt different about the silence now that morning had come. It was almost as if the seer was letting her catch her breath, but only to intensify the suspense. As she brewed a strong cup of coffee, her phone chimed. Another message. She hesitated, hand hovering over the screen, afraid to see what was next. Finally, she opened it. The truth is closer than you think. Today at 3 p.m. If you want answers, come alone. Below the message was an address, a nondescript building on the outskirts of town. Mia's heart pounded. She felt an overwhelming dread but knew she couldn't ignore it. Whatever was going on, this might be her only chance to understand why the seer had chosen her. The hours dragged by, but eventually, it was time to leave. As she stepped outside, she checked her surroundings, feeling as if 1,000 eyes were watching her. She caught the bus to the address, her anxiety mounting with each mile closer. When she arrived, the building looked abandoned. It was a gray, crumbling structure surrounded by overgrown weeds. Mia took a deep breath and pushed open the door, her footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. Suddenly, she heard a faint hum, and her phone buzzed with a livestream notification. It was from an unknown source. She clicked it, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. The live stream was of her, walking through the very building she was in. The caption read, "Welcome, Mia. This is your last chance to turn back." Mia's stomach twisted. Her every move was being watched. She considered running, but something compelled her forward. She walked deeper into the building until she found herself standing in front of a door at the end of a dim hallway. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a darkened room beyond. Inside, a single light flickered above a table, casting long shadows across the space. On the table lay a laptop with an open document titled The Truth. Mia approached it cautiously and began to read. The document was a detailed account of her life, filled with events she hadn't told anyone. Childhood secrets, private moments, even her darkest thoughts. Every intimate detail was captured in cold, clinical language. Her stomach churned as she realized that the seer knew her better than she knew herself. Then, another message appeared on the screen. You've been living in a carefully crafted lie. Your memories, your choices, your very identity, none of it is as real as you think. What does that mean? She whispered, feeling a mix of anger and fear rise within her. Suddenly, a soft voice echoed from behind her, almost a whisper. It means you've been a part of our experiment, Mia. She spun around, heart racing, to find a man standing in the shadows, his face obscured by a hood. Who are you? She demanded. The man took a step forward, revealing a face that was hauntingly familiar but just out of reach in her memory. We are everywhere. We control the fabric of people's lives, planting seeds in their minds, crafting memories, shaping destinies. You're just one of many. Mia backed away, but the man's words pulled her in. Why me? Why go to all this trouble? He smiled, but it was cold, devoid of empathy. You're one of the few who began to remember the truth, who began to question the reality we've built for you. That made you a liability. But instead of erasing you, we decided to watch. And you didn't disappoint. Erasing me? She echoed, horror dawning on her face. Yes, he replied calmly. But now, there's no need. You've seen too much, and you'll never trust your own memories again. The man moved toward her, reaching into his pocket. Mia's heart pounded as she considered running, but her legs felt like lead. Just then, her phone buzzed with another message. Run. Without a second thought, Mia bolted out of the room, sprinting down the hallway as the man's footsteps echoed behind her. She flew out of the building, her breath ragged, not daring to look back. She didn't stop running until she was far away, lost in the anonymity of the city crowds. Once she was safe, she collapsed onto a park bench, her heart racing, her mind spinning. She knew her life would never be the same. The seer's words echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder that her past, her memories, and her identity had all been manipulated. She didn't know what was real anymore. But one thing was clear, she had to find out who the seer really was and uncover the truth. Because if they had done this to her, they could be doing it to anyone. And Mia would stop at nothing to make sure they paid for it. Mia spent the next few days trying to piece together her shattered reality. She delved into every lead, every obscure message the seer had left, each breadcrumb pointing her to a twisted history that seemed to stretch back farther than her own memory. She combed through old photos, public records, and finally, her own medical files. It was there, in the forgotten margins of a childhood psychological evaluation, that she found a detail she'd never noticed before. A notation that read, "Patient shows promising response to experimental memory reshaping." She froze. This wasn't just about surveillance or twisted games, this had been happening since she was a child. The organization, or whatever it was, had been in her life from the start. And then it struck her. She hadn't always gone by the name Mia. There was a time when she'd been called something else, a name she'd almost forgotten. Her phone buzzed, and she flinched, bracing for another taunt. But this time, it was a simple message. Are you ready to remember who you really are, Emma? Her heart stopped. Emma. That name stirred something deep and dark inside her, like a floodgate opening. Flashes of memories she didn't recognize, of people and places she didn't know, rushed through her mind. A childhood home that wasn't hers, a family she didn't remember. And then she understood. She was the experiment itself. The life she'd been living wasn't just manipulated, it was never hers to begin with.